What's up, you sweaty nerds and greasy degenerates? Xuan will be arriving in Honkai Star Rail in only 1 week from now, and so I thought it would be good to go ahead and address a question that a lot of people have been asking. Will Xuan be the best solo sustain unit in Honkai Star Rail? So let's go ahead and dive in. If you can believe it, months ago when I made my first Xuan video, there were a lot of people in the comments claiming that Xuan is mid, that Xuan seems underwhelming. You have no idea how many comments that I got that said, I don't know, I think she's mid. Doing. Like, I think people just have PTSD from Genshin Impact because of how things went with Dea. But we have found from Blade and how they have introduced him into the game that Hoyoverse can introduce characters that scale with abilities that are outside of their own path and still perform well. Blade is one of the most fun characters in the game and one of the best characters in the game, and he has HP scaling despite being a DPS character. And Xuan will also have HP scaling despite being a preservation character, which normally would scale off of defense. And honestly, I'm really excited about that. I think that if you can do alternative scaling right, they are sometimes the best units in the game and often will change the meta, just like Blade did, and I believe Xuan will be doing the same. So let's go ahead and talk about it. In an attempt to not sound too repetitive, I'm not going to go into Xuan's kit too deeply. I'm just going to mention that she has combat abilities that will help your team out in terms of boosting your overall damage. She will also have damage of her own. She's going to have a powerful ultimate that actually deals AoE quantum damage. She has permanent damage mitigation. She can redirect some of the damage to herself through her skill and also mitigate even more damage. She has passive abilities that can heal her. She has her ultimate that can heal her as well. Xuan is a very strong unit, so let's just get some of that out of the way. But I wanted to talk about maybe some comparisons with another very strong preservation unit and other strong healers such as Luocha in order to kind of try to figure out where she can kind of sit in the meta and what she can provide to the team. So I firstly wanted to compare Xuan to Luocha, because Luocha is currently considered to be the best solo sustain unit in the game, at least right now. Most people think that, and any player that has Luocha pretty much considers him to be a cheat code for the game, because he pretty much makes it so that your team can't die as long as they don't literally get one shot, because as long as his field is active, your team will be able to heal itself just by attacking the enemies, which is what you want to do anyways. So there's not really much of a downside to his healing effect. Other healers a lot of the time will have to burn skill points or wait till their ultimate is ready in order to do so. Luocha works differently, and he is the strongest healer because of that. But there is a little bit of a caveat to it. Every once in a while, some Luocha players will say, if they're admitting it, that his field doesn't stay active 100% of the time. Every once in a while, some Luocha players might not have that field active, making your team a little bit vulnerable, at least for that one turn, which is not usually that big of a deal, but every once in a while, that's why some characters will go down and not get healed in time. But with Xuan doesn't have that problem necessarily. Xuan has a skill that you can kind of compare to Luocha's field, where when Xuan's skill is active, she has really powerful damage mitigation and redirects most of the damage to herself. But even when her skill is not active, Xuan's talent has permanent uptime, and your team has permanent damage mitigation while she is on your team. When the skill is active, it just mitigates even more. So there isn't ever a downside, there isn't ever a fully vulnerable time with a Xuan on your team. So she gets that little bit of an edge ahead of Luocha in that way. But it kind of evens itself out a little bit because, let's be honest here, with Luocha, he can fully heal your entire team. it will be pretty often, a lot of the time, with a Fu Xuan solo sustain team, that your team will have a little bit of damage a lot of the time because you're not probably getting those heals very often. She's mostly mitigating the damage. She's not really healing that much, right? So there's kind of like that little bit of an uptick for Fu Xuan in that way, but again, Luocha has a little bit of an uptick himself because he can fully heal your entire team. So honestly, it is a little bit tough to say right now who's better, Luocha or Fu Xuan, because they both have these really good benefits and they kind of have in their own way a little bit of a one-up on each other, which somewhat evens them out in terms of what's on paper. However, depending on how long the battle actually lasts, Fu Xuan might be the better unit, because if the battles are typically a little bit shorter and you're trying to get faster clears, as long as you don't take enough damage and go down, Fu Xuan actually provides extra damage to your team and has damage of her own. Most Luocha players aren't dealing that much damage with their solo sustain unit. Fu Xuan actually will be dealing that damage. So if you're on longer battles, you know, Luocha might actually be the better unit. It kind of just depends on whether you end up getting one shot or not. If the battles are shorter, Fu Xuan might be the better unit for those battles because as long as you clear the content, that's all that really matters, right? And you pretty much can't go down with a Fu Xuan on your team. You most of the time won't be able to get one shot because Fu Xuan will be mitigating that damage. So I do think that who's the best solo sustain unit at this time might actually be dependent on what content you are currently facing against. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, that we don't fully know at this time who's going to be the actual best solo sustain unit in the game. I want to kind of give the edge to Fu Xuan right now, but in all fairness, I can't definitively say that, and I don't think anyone fully can either. Because we just simply don't know with 100% certainty. The numbers right now seem to show that Fu Xuan might end up being the one who edges it out on her release. There is something called power creep in the game after all, but, you know, at the same time, even though there's been power creep, Sela ended up having the #1 DPS slot all the way up until Dan Heng's release. So some units will have longevity in this game even though they came out earlier. And let's not forget all the lore that surrounds Luocha, so it's going to be a little bit tough to say who the best solo sustain unit is, but we should find out in roughly a week from now. But let's go ahead and compare Fu Xuan to another character in the game. Maybe let's go ahead and talk about Gepard. So let's try to compare Fu Xuan to Gepard. They're from the same path, but they are just so different. Fu Xuan does damage mitigation, and Gepard puts up shields. And it's like two opposite ends of trying to do the same thing, which is prevent damage from coming through. But the thing about Fu Xuan is that her damage mitigation is not technically capped. Gepard's shields are capped at a certain number. It's a really high number, but it is technically capped. You can only build your shields so big. But with Fu Xuan, it's not technically capped. People in my previous video about Fu Xuan tried to correct me on this and say that it is capped because of her health, which is not actually true. I actually agreed with them, and then I realized like the next day I was like, wait, that's not actually true. She will die. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to like. I'm not in a a fantasy world here. Fu Xuan will die, right? Depending on how much damage comes through. But if the enemy dealt 1,000,000 damage, she's going to mitigate a super huge number. She's going to mitigate some massive number you couldn't ever possibly imagine a character preventing, and she will prevent most of that from coming through. You could stack up literally 100 Gepard shields in a row on top of each other, and it still couldn't possibly come up to what Fu Xuan could potentially mitigate. It's insane. It's not actually capped. Her percentage is capped, but if the enemy's damage keeps going up and up and up and up and up and up and up, Fu Xuan's mitigation keeps going up and up and up and up and up and up and up. Gepard's shield is stuck there. It is stuck and it cannot go up unless your defense goes up. But that's a little bit different, right? So Fu Xuan has a higher ceiling, a higher potential than Gepard will have. Unfortunate for Gepard, but it makes sense because Gepard is a standard banner character and Fu Xuan is she's a premium banner character, so this makes a lot of sense. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Gepard. He's super cool. I'm jealous because I don't even have him. But Fu Xuan does have a higher skill ceiling than Gepard does, and because we can build for that, because of the different content, especially with Swarm Disaster coming out now, Fu Xuan's value just keeps going up more and more and more the longer we go into this game, and the more content that comes out, the Fu Xuan stocks just keep going up and up and up, not just because of things like Mono Quantum, not just because of like things like Swarm Disaster, where the enemies deal massive amount of damage, and we've all seen it, right? We've all seen it on YouTube. The Gepard shields get completely obliterated and one-shot down, and your team goes down anyways, even though Gepard's shields were up. That is probably not going to happen with Fu Xuan on your team because she mitigates so much of that damage, and that damage is technically not capped. Yes, your team can still die. Yes, she can still die, but it's not technically capped, and that's the point that I want to try to make when comparing the two of them together. And that's also a good reason why Fu Xuan might potentially be better than Luocha, because you can't heal a downed character. And Fu Xuan can prevent your character from going down probably better than any unit that is in the game or even coming in the game in the foreseeable future. So that is personally why I'm giving the edge to Fu Xuan as potentially being the best solo sustained character in the game. I don't want to put, the gold star on her, the gold medal around her yet. Let's wait till she comes out. But as far as predictions go, I see a lot of value in Fu Xuan, and I think that she might just get the edge over a character like Luocha or Gepard and be the best solo sustain unit in the game. But I'm wrong sometimes. Go ahead and put your input into the comments. Let me know what you think was wrong or right. If this video was entertaining to you in any way, shape, or form, please leave a like and subscribe, because if you don't subscribe, I'm gonna come to your house in the middle of the night, like the boogeyman, and I'm gonna steal your favorite midnight snacks. Probably those Oreos, or maybe those Pringles you got in the pantry. Maybe the lasagna you got there in the refrigerator. I'm not picky. I'll come for whatever you got. So like and subscribe for more.